button, and that's recording, and we'll do a little bit of this.
Toy Power Podcast is a free podcast made possible by the support of our awesome Patreon sponsors. Head to toypowerpodcast.com and see how you can help.
Oh yeah, this is power.
Hello and welcome to Toy Power, the podcast where we talk toys and everything pop culture. G'day, I'm Trent, and it is wonderful to have your company today for episode 399. Now, I normally would say joining me in the Toy Power studio, but there's literally no one in the Toy Power studio. But our great friend of the show and collaborator, Mr. Colin Betts, is joining us, filling in to make the show happen all the way from Ottawa, Canada. Colin, welcome back to Toy Power.
Thanks so much for having me. My personality is so big, I'm making up for Scott, Ben, and Frank.
Yeah, filling the room, filling the studio. So, it's great. Actually, the genesis of this episode, we're going to take a break and do a retro episode because Toy Geeks and Refreshing Thoughts podcaster Mr. Chris Fresh is getting married tomorrow. So the lads, Scotty and Ben have flown up for the wedding along with Davey and Brett. So if you do want to check out, I think there is a Geek Dudes episode featuring, there's like 10 of them in the room. Yeah, it's like the mega podcast. So check out the lads. They recorded that, I think, last night, and it is now released. But just want to send a big shout out to Chris and Jesse. A big congratulations on the nuptials, and we hope you have had a fantastic day. But yeah, Colin, you reached out. You'd heard that there was going to be no one here in the studio, so you reached out, and we have compiled this special episode to keep Toy Power going. So thank you for jumping in at the last minute.
Oh no, my pleasure. Any chance to jump on the show is a good one, and so excited to hear about Fresh and Jess's coming nuptials. So wish I could be there. Congratulations to you both.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, we've got a action-packed episode. We are going to chat. We're going to do a vintage toy line retrospective on what Dan Larson has called an oddity in Secret Galaxy. We're going to talk about a Milton Bradley toy line from, I think, 1984 that is still alive and kicking today. We don't say that about a lot of toy lines. And we're also going to do a little bit of a stop and check in on the Kickstarter situation. Colin, I think you were saying you've got about 30 odd Kickstarters that you have pledged for. You're sort of waiting in the wings or have received. So we're going to do a little bit of checking what's happening.
Money in, money out.
Yeah, that's right. It's just a revolving door of exciting goodies. But there is a very exciting G.I. Joe Kickstarter that is, I think it's literally a day or so away from closing, and it is worth a shout out if you do want to check out that particular Kickstarter. We'll touch on it as we go. But Colin, before we jump into the episode proper, what's been happening in Canada? Any exciting toy related news or latest scores at your end?
Well, we can get into some of that with the Kickstarter stuff in terms of latest scores. I'm like, we've just come through a provincial election in February. We've come through a federal election in the end of April. We just had a cabinet sworn in. So this is my day job, right, in working for the government of Canada. So it's exciting times up here for all that. And of course, we're watching all the machinations, both, politically and personally, in terms of what's going on in the United States with the tariffs, with all the shenanigans going on down there. So it's a lot in that regard. We were talking a little bit just before the show. Like one of the new things that's going on here is we used to have a company called EB Games, which many of you are familiar with. It was an affiliate of GameStop. GameStop proper came in and basically took over the business, rebranded the business as GameStop in Canada. I think that was probably a year and a half ago. So new signage everywhere. And it's just come out in the last month that The Canadian branch has been sold to the owner of Mastermind Toys in Canada, and they are going back to the EB Games branding. So all that new signage. You know, locally, we've been hit both in December with some Toys R Us closings, and then recently some closings at the end of April. So Ottawa used to have 5 Toys R Us, and there was 1 in Gatineau. Now we're down to 2 in Ottawa, and the remaining 1 in Gatineau, just on the other side of Quebec. So we've lost half of our Toys R Us. The sell-offs were kind of amazing. They sort of start with 20% off, 30% off, going down to 90% off. So at the end of it, people were just like taking big swaths of stuff. I think I ended up with about $800 of merch for about 2.
Wow.
It was. What's interesting when a store goes out of business like this is what hangs around on the pegs even when it's 80% off, 90% off, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's all the McFarlane toys sitting there. And even when it was 90% off, you could not sell John Kent to save your life.
Yeah, right.
There were a couple of G.I. Joes that were still lingering. What's the word I'm looking for here? Lingering.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Classified?
Lingering and mingling. Yeah.
G.I. Joe Classified or Super 7 Reaction?
We don't get Super 7 at Toys R Us.
Right.
There were classifieds. What was left on the last day that I was there was a dock, there was a shipwreck, and there was a carded Lady J. All of which I had, so nothing there. A couple of Transformers hanging around. A lot of the various new iterations of the Turtles, like the latest iteration of the Turtles. But at 80-90%, people are just grabbing and hoping to hold on to them, flip them in a bit. So, some DVDs, some records and whatnot. Toys R Us has been really interesting in Canada because, they were bought when Toys R Us United States went out of business by a company called Fairfax. A couple of years later, they were spun off to another company that owns Sunrise Records here in Canada. And this guy is a serial entrepreneur, so he keeps buying or starting new businesses. And when they fail, the remnants end up on the floor of Toys R Us. So you'll walk into Toys R Us now, and you literally are hit with HMV, which he has the rights to. So there's a whole record selection, CDs, DVDs, and all that. There's the toys, obviously, but then there's like household goods like pots and pans and blankets and stuff from Bed Bath & Beyond type business that he tried and it just didn't go anywhere. So it's interesting. So we'll see. I'm a little concerned about Toys R Us and its sort of long-term place in the Canadian retail marketplace. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, Toys R Us was the US, I guess, before the US company went into administration and then liquidation. Really, we lost, I guess, a lot of what was at the core of Toys R Us in terms of the buying power, the distribution, the exclusives, all of that side of it. So in Australia, the Toys R Us sort of brand was purchased, and essentially, really is only Toys R Us in name. It's an online presence. There's no physical stores anymore, and it's sort of like any kind of toy online retailer. It feels very homogenous in the sense it's got a lot of the same sort of supply chain. So it really, whilst the name sort of lives on here in Australia, it's certainly nothing in terms of what Toys R Us offered in the past, in particular with the mass distribution networks that they were able to achieve and the exclusives, which is really sort of lost.
We only had Toys R Us since about 1984 that it appeared in Canada. At its height, it had 82 stores across the country. There was at least one in every province. The province of Prince Edward Island is an island of about 150,000 people. They had one in Charlottetown. That one is now gone. The nearest Toys R Us for them is, I think, Halifax. I know one of the Toys R Us in Halifax is gone. A lot of smaller communities in Ontario have lost their Toys R Us, and bigger ones too. Like I said, I mean, we lost 3 of the 5 in Ottawa, but I know some of the northern towns in Ontario, like I think Thunder Bay, North Bay, I think they've lost theirs. So what's interesting is every time you do a check, the media still talks about this 82 store strong enterprise, but we're probably down to like 40 now.
Yeah.
That of course affects their buying power, and they were already having a problem because at least their Hasbro merch was higher priced than what you were seeing at Walmart, and that was a relatively recent change. I think that came with the handover to the new business. Up until then, they had been relatively competitive, but now it's you were better off getting it from Walmart if you could find it. So now we were getting some of the exclusive Hasbro product, so you would see things like the retro carded classified figures that were showing up there that had originally been at Toys R Us, but that stuff was expensive too. So
well, interesting movements over there, and unfortunately we are starting to see statistics coming out of the US for the mid to small size toy manufacturers, and the impacts that it's going to have on them. I've seen some statistics that is basically saying a number of those organizations will be out of business and won't survive, the next couple of months. We did see layoffs at Super 7, which was really heartbreaking to see, people that have appeared on podcasts, have appeared promoting the products, a really good design team and marketers that have unfortunately lost their jobs, I think, as a result of the tariffs. So this is sort of now the start of what we're going to see moving forward, and it is quite tragic and quite bleak. I think if what I understand correctly is some of the increased tariffs on China have been reduced in the last week or so, but it's sometimes all a little too late when your policy is sort of fluctuating and you're trying to make decisions based on what you think is in play at any given time. So it's an unfortunate situation, and I guess everyone's sort of just bracing to see how bad and what the ramifications are.
Well, it's really interesting how many people have become armchair economists in the last 6 months. There were tariffs on China, as I understand it.
Yes,
that were held over from the Trump administration's first term. That President Biden had kept in place, but they were relatively minor and they were absorbable. He went up to the current administration went up to about 145% tariffs on China until they backed away last week or in the last 10 days. So I mean, there are still tariffs. There's still 30% on those goods, but it's just it's a hold right now, right? Like, it's a 90-day period at 30%. So companies still don't have that certainty that they need in order to figure out what kind of product orders we're gonna put in. It's interesting because it really hits. I mean, it's going to affect Hasbro and Mattel and some of the bigger companies, definitely. But it's also you're seeing it in the smaller companies for sure. Like Super 7 has just had a number of layoffs. I don't know the size of that, but that's a huge hit. Longbox Heroes from Fresh Monkey Fiction.
Yes,
like they were one of the first ones, right? They had a second wave of their Secret Wars style figures.
Yeah, the Longbox Heroes. Yeah, they got canned.
That got
just
canned.
Wasn't economical, to sell at that price.
And I think there's a lot of Kickstarters that could have been that will not be because of this. Like, I cannot imagine what's going to happen with a company like Skeletron. They still have some 6-inch, some 4-inch figures left for the RoboSkull collection. I mean, some of those are going to get hit by tariffs. And then you get to the bigger companies, right? Like Omega Prime, the most recent, one of the most recent Transformer HasLabs, is shipping and has been shipping for the last sort of 6 weeks. And there's been a big problem with the chest. Like there's a crack in it. It doesn't transform properly. People have been having to send it back to Hasbro. But the scuttlebug that I've been hearing is that the reason there's the problem is that Hasbro was trying to get everything out the door before the tariffs hit.
Right.
In order to avoid that additional cost. And that has led to a situation where, a subpar product has hit the market. So, I mean, we may see things like that. Like it may no longer be cost effective to do Kickstarters, right? Like,
yeah.
A lot of those, G.I. Joe, Ghostbusters, Transformers, we've sort of done the big things, right? Like you take Transformers, right? We've done a Unicron, we've done a Victory Saber, we've done a Deathsaurus, Omega Prime. They've just announced and finished a Kickstarter for Leo Kaiser. It's a struggle to figure out what's next when you put out at mass market the big guys like Devastator and Metroplex and Trypticon. So it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. But yeah, the new pricing for Hasbro toys is getting to be quite expensive. How it's going to affect us, I don't know in Canada, because a lot of that stuff, I don't know the distribution. I don't know if it comes into Rhode Island and then gets shipped up to Longueuil, Quebec, where we have our Hasbro Canada facility, or if it comes in directly to Hasbro Canada and we get spared some of those tariffs.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it's the latter, but it's hard to say.
Yeah.
And then on a more macro level, we're getting into the situation where, the uncertainty about tariffs, the uncertainty about the manufacturing in Canada, there's a big sucking sound to the United States, right? Like it's this, are we going to continue to put in this plant in Canada to take advantage of sort of just-in-time resource and proximity between Canada and the United States, or are we just going to set up shop in the United States and go forward that way? Like there's been a number of car companies in Ontario and elsewhere in the country that have put the brakes on new facilities or are reconsidering some of those moves. And we're only 4 or 5 months into this new Trump administration. So it's really scary up here from an economic perspective too. Not to mention the fact that every time we turn around, Trump keeps talking about the blessed 51st state that is in his heart, Canada.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. Add an extra star to the flag, Colin.
Yeah. As we say in Canada, elbows up, right? Like there is no way. I mean, it's just we just shake our heads up here. It's just nonsense. What the Trump administration is saying about Canada, about Greenland, about the Panama Canal. But anyway, elbows up.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the Kickstarters, do we want to start with this G.I. Joe Real American Hero Field Guides by 3D Joes? Now, 3D Joes is one of the great resources for your vintage G.I. Joes. That sort of that design of having them turn around and being able to view them in 3D is quite amazing. But the resource is incredible. It's Carson, isn't it? And he's putting out these brilliant set. I think there's basically 4 volumes. They're kind of like pocket-sized volumes. And each of the volumes will cover like a complete visual representation and guide of, say, all the loose figures, right? You can, in one little pocket-sized book, all the loose figures. Then he'll do one for file cards, one for carded figures, and the final one will be vehicles and play sets. This Kickstarter, it has 37 hours to go as of this recording, which will be about a day when we release this episode. It has currently got to what do we at? $334,000 Australian of a $56,000 goal. So they've well and truly smashed it with 1,708 backers. Colin, are you in for this one?
Yeah, I am in for this one. So one of the things about the G.I. Joe community, as you know, as we've talked about, all of the identification guides for G.I. Joe, predominantly it's the Mark Bellomo books, which were on volume 3 the last time they were put out, which was pre-pandemic. They're $100, $150 in the secondary market, impossible to find, but they are well-worn, really important assets in the Joe community, particularly for all those parts, particularly as you get into the later years. If I had a criticism about the Bellomo books, it's that they have a richness of photography and information about the early years and a lot less information about 92, 93, 94, particularly 94. The pictures get really small. There's not a lot of information, but those are the years where all the accessories came on a square peg. So you had to basically model kit style take them off of the flash, and it's those years that a lot of Joe fans are less familiar with. There's a lot more accessories. It's a lot harder to sort of figure out what is and what is not complete. So I'm excited for a Kickstarter that's going to hopefully remedy that gives a 1993 figure the same viability as a 1992 or 1982, 1983 figure. So I'm excited about that. It's done so well that Carson has added the 4th book, because up until that point it was 3 books. There's a whole book on file cards, which is going to be really interesting. I think, like you said, the figures, like, it's basically the dimensions of the book. You're going to see a figure the size of the actual figure.
Yeah.
There's a nice little checklist in there. It's going to be really great to be walking around places and being like, okay, this is what I need for this particular vehicle or figure. He had mused at one point about expanding, so going beyond the 1982 to 1994 collection to look at other market Joes, so Brazilian, Argentinian, UK. Variants from Japan, China. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I'm hopeful that it will. One of the great resource in the Joe community is still Yojo. It's the one that has everything from 1982 right up until 2018. It was a very vibrant website that didn't really segregate Joes. It wasn't like you were an old school O-Ring fan or you were a 25th anniversary. Like, everything was a Joe. And the website got sold probably before the pandemic, at least, and is basically just sitting on its past glories. But it's still one of these amazing sites. I use it all the time to see what modern interpretations look like for kit bashing purposes. Trying to figure out like what gun goes to which thing. The 3D Joes are really good, but it's a different beast. It's showcasing the figure. It's not more of a collector's guide.
Yeah.
But Carson's stuff has been amazing over the years. Like, he did the Art of G.I. Joe omnibus. He did the smaller books to come out with. The omnibus is a beast.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's heavy. It's, I don't know. Like, I had to build a special bookcase just to fit it in there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I'm exaggerating a bit, but we were doing some renovations at the house. I wanted a bookcase. I've always wanted a bookcase that was in the wall as opposed to just standalone.
Yes.
And about the same time, Carson's book came in, and so the bookcase is about 14 inches deep, and it's just deep enough to hold Carson's book.
That's fantastic. And
if I sit it down.
Right. That's now that book you're talking about, is that the compilation of all the painted artwork from both the file, the blister cards, and the box art, and all of that? It's like an incredible compilation.
So he had started with these standard size, 9x11 books. 2 years at a time. The series went for 6 issues. Eventually, there was a box that we could put it all in. It's a really amazing compilation. And then he did the bigger monster set, which had additional paintings that had come in the meantime, additional art. And it's not just the box art, the card art, but it's like every painting that was done for promotions, for unreleased figures, for the Find Your Fate books, lunch boxes. It's a really tremendous labor of love. So the amount of work he's done getting up to this point, I mean, it's going to show right in these books as well. And like I said, I'm hoping that there's such a success that we move on to a second tier of them, where we get to see some vintage Joes from other markets as well. So.
Yeah, beautiful. That one, just for all you listening at home, if you do have an interest in picking that up, G.I. Joe Real American Hero Field Guides by 3D Joes. Colin, you have some exciting figures that have come in from some Kickstarters. I know we did a coverage. I know Ben was particularly excited about this Battle Beast sort of inspired toy line that I believe they were doing not only in sort of that 6-7 inch highly articulated action figure style, but also they were going to do some of those smaller, stockier kind of like super, I guess you'd call them super deformed or stylized versions that are akin to what we got in the 80s from Battle Beasts. And those have been realized now and shipped out to customers. We were having a little bit of a look at those prior to recording, and they are incredible in terms of the sculpt, the final designs, and in particular the articulation they've managed to get into those.
Yeah, I mean, there's at least 30 points of articulation. It's all ball jointed. So there's 4 figures in the line. It's called the Creature Commandos. It closed in December of 2023. They showed up, I think, 2 weeks ago in Canada, a couple of weeks before that in some of the U.S. destinations, which is, for a Kickstarter, a pretty good turnaround, right? Like just a little over a year, really. Good communication from the company, the Morphonauts. 4 figures in the line. They have names, but I can't really remember them. Like most of my toys that I didn't grow up with. There's a shark motif. There's a grizzly bear. There's a wolf, and there's a lion. And yeah, like knees and ankles and wrists and elbows and torso. Each figure comes with a helmeted head, a large gun of some description, a couple of bladed weapons, and they retailed. I mean, after everything was said and done, they retailed for about $35 USD. So,
okay, yeah,
a pretty decent price. Go in very well with your 6-inch classifieds or your Master of the Universe figures. They look pretty great on the shelf. They are inspired by Battle Beasts, and referencing that, homaging that those origins. They did 2.5 inch scale versions of the same 4 characters, but in that Battle Beast scale.
Yeah,
and they are basically 1-to-1 scale with them.
right.
So Ben has a package that's coming shortly of the 4. You have to assemble them. You have to be very careful when you're putting them together. You've got to use put them in boiling water to loosen up the plastic. Otherwise, you can't put them in. And like the original Battle Beast, it's basically just arm articulation.
Okay.
But,
yep.
And no rub symbol, obviously.
No.
But
yeah.
But some nice weapons. They look really nice, very paintable. So yeah, and you could have gotten versions in the 4-inch scale as well. like the 3D print recipes to do that. So again, like we'll see what happens. They are talking about a second wave. One of the add-ons for people who were participating in the Kickstarter was you could design your own. And if there was enough take-up, enough interest in that one, that could be part of the second wave. But I mean, again, if the tariffs are what they are, then that might be a toy line that this is it. So,
yeah.
But happy to have it. It's a pretty nice line, and there's a few little things like some of the joints are a little loose in parts, but for a representation that sits on the shelves, they look pretty great.
Yeah, so. Nice. No, that's good. I'm glad someone went in on the Kickstarter because Ben in particular was super excited by those, and I'm glad he's been able to get his hands on the 2-inch because the Battle Beasts are a bit of an obscurity. I mean, there's a number of fans of Battle Beasts. I'm one. I have a not fully complete by any means collection, but I'm about 10 off, and certainly no Laser Beasts. But Ben flies the Battle Beast flag pretty high and wide.
Absolutely.
And we'll love to get anything into his collection that he can put with his beloved Battle Beast.
I had just sent him a posting that had come up in one of the Canadian toy groups. Somebody had popped into a Value Village and found a bag of 3 or 4 bags of Battle Beasts. So I think he ended up spending probably about $20 on the whole collection.
Right.
And I think there was something like 18 Battle Beasts. But what was even more remarkable was they had their weapons.
Wow.
In one of the bags. And there were 8 Laser Beasts with weapons.
Jeepers.
Yeah.
Wow. What a
score
find.
of a lifetime.
Yeah. That is something you'll take any day of the week and hold on to that story for a while, because that is absolutely nuts. That is wonderful. I love those stories. Good. It's good you can have the holy grails in these day and age.
Love them and have the envy of not having it happen to yourself.
Yeah, so. Right. One day, you strike the jackpot. Now that's brilliant.
I was really lucky. About 4 years ago, I was in a Value Village and did find a bag of Battle Beasts and California Raisins of all things.
Yeah.
So for about $5, I came home with 11 Battle Beasts.
Yeah.
No weapons, no Laser Beasts, but that's probably one of the greatest finds I've ever had at a Value Village. So
yeah. No, I think. Look, here in Australia, we have sort of, I guess, the equivalent. Savers, yeah, that they bag them up, and those are, there's the hardcore collectors that are in scouring those bags sort of every day to find those gems. So you have to beat them being early and get a bit lucky to have those sort of finds. But
I think we've mentioned this before, but my buddy Dan is one of those people who goes and scours Value Village, and he rings me up about 3 months ago and says, "You'll never guess what I found," and it was a loose blank, no mask, no hat, but a loose blank.
Yeah.
So and probably one of those situations that even the pickers who were going through didn't know what it was.
They wouldn't have. No, that's right. And I guess they can't photograph and load up everything. It's just be too time consuming. So they have to make calls on what they think and what knowledge they have. But I guess I can't even imagine a blank floating around here in Australia, but in Canada, where I think at least had a Sears release back in the day, that story makes a lot of sense that it is sort of floating around, and that is a wonderful score. Yeah, that is brilliant. Anything else on your Kickstarter radar?
I have just. My credit card has just bled out, $450 USD for the Transformers Compendium from Marvel. It's the Skybound reissue of not just the US Marvel comics, but the UK Marvel comics as well. They did this last year with G.I. Joe, with a complete run of the Larry Hama stuff from issue 1 to 154. I didn't go into the G.I. Joe one because I have all of those trades in one form or another.
Yes.
I did go in with the Transformers because the books just looked fantastic, and they were offering 2 different versions, so you could get the 4 books, so 2 US and 2 UK, or you could get one where they actually put them in the order of how they would have come out in the UK, where the US and the UK were interspliced into each other from a story perspective.
Gotcha.
So,
yep.
Yeah. So I believe they're using the redone coloring that was done for the Hachette trade paperbacks that they did 4 or 5 years ago in Europe. I believe some of them came out in Australia as well. Beautiful renderings of the books in hardcover form. I have tried a couple of times to get my hands on a complete collection of this 100 set of trades just for the extras, to no avail. But the art looks amazing, and so that's supposed to be coming in December. There was another Kickstarter that recently shipped out called In the Navy. It was one that I jumped on through BackerKit as opposed to through Kickstarter, but it was basically a bunch of 3 3/4-inch O-ring G.I. Joe style figures, but sailors and flight officers, really taking a moment to fill in the gap that happened with the Sky Striker when we didn't get the flight control, the flight deck controllers, ketchup and mustard. So they have come in. They are really, really well done for figures. They've got the traditional articulation, plus they have pop off hands. So there's a bit of articulation there, but allows different different playability there. I've been really impressed by the figures so far, and they had a running change because there was something about how the hips of the figure sat with the O-ring. So they did a new chest for a number of the figures. So we got both of those. So from a Kit Basher perspective, it's amazing to have all these extra heads and hands and chest pieces that I can use for other projects. So that's come in recently. So I think that's sort of it.
Yeah, brilliant. That's super exciting. And I was just reflecting, I know off air, EB Games here in Australia got some surplus Kickstarter or HasLab projects that they must have had cancelled orders or something and had a bit of extra stock, or maybe they'd purchased in excess. But they had the Ghost, they had the Dragonfly from G.I. Joe Classified, and they had the Proton Pack from Ghostbusters go up on the website yesterday. And so that was really, really exciting. I jumped on the Dragonfly, which I didn't get, and that will now complete my G.I. Joe trinity of vehicles from the HasLabs, which is wonderful. But I reckon that Ghost would have been great value as well to jump in on if any Star Wars fans had missed that. So it's sometimes these things do pop up beyond the initial release, and that is sort of just a really exciting little tidbit that happened here in Australia. So that was fantastic.
Yeah, certainly GameStop, EB Games in Canada has been really good at getting a lot of the San Diego Comic-Con exclusives.
Yep.
So back when they were doing the War for Cybertron line, and they had the exclusive Skywarp Sideswipe set that was impossible to get anywhere else. We got it up here, I think, twice. Death's Head, Death's Head has shown up more recently. The Once a Man Cobra Commander, I hear, made it up to Canada, but I think it was just such a sellout that it was gone in minutes.
We got that actually I think did pop up in our EB Games, and I think potentially a wider release here as well. So it might have even, but it sat around for a while. I managed to jag one again through EB Games. But that was, again, like it's like these things you go, I never thought I'd land that, let alone locally, to sort of walk in and order it from a store, which is fantastic. These are the lovely sort of surprises and little bits that when you are an international collector, and you kind of have to write some of this stuff off because it is the way of the world, it is lovely when it does go back the other way.
Well, certainly for San Diego this year, they're doing the Dreadnoughts Cold Slither line, where they dressed up as a rock band to indoctrinate the next generation of Cobra. And I'm hoping that'll show up as well. I mean, certainly going to try and get that through a pre-order through Hasbro Pulse, but yeah, like that's a must-have.
Yeah.
Must-have in my collection.
Yeah, that's such a cool set. And I love the box art with the little gem poster at the bottom is wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That is excellent. All right. We're going to head into our next segment.
Vintage Toyline Retrospective.
You've got to come back with me.
Just get those wonderful toys.
You're an action figure.
You're mocking me, aren't you?
All right. We are talking about Robotics, which is a 1984 Milton Bradley toy line. And I guess the best way, if you're not familiar with this toy line, and I'm certainly no expert, and that's why I've got Colin here to take us through it. But essentially, if you sort of think about robots, so Transformers mixed with Lego, so they're modular and you can build your own different variations, mixed with mechanical parts or motors, so you could essentially motorize these products as well. I think this is fantastic. Colin, you'll get into this a little bit, but you did send me some of the animation. I think it got about 18 6-minute animated shorts that may have released with the shows like Jen and the Holograms as part of a sort of Saturday morning style or Sunday morning style of join the dots and watch the shows together, that were then combined into sort of like to make up a bit of a movie. But I think we just have to play the opening 30 seconds because it's one of those instances where obviously it's a toy. I think there's some likes in terms of Hasbro acquiring robotics through a Milton Bradley acquisition at some point, and trying to market it in the way that they'd create, a story, and there's the good guys and there's the bad guys. Just see the way the marketing team managed to work with the animators to cram in the entire story, or the backstory, in 30 seconds.
To survive a cosmic storm that devastates their planet, the Protectons and Terracors are forced to transfer their essences into the huge, powerful bodies of robotics. And once again, the ancient hostilities between the valiant Protectons and the evil Terracors erupt into violence, each side made stronger by an organic interface with human beings.
Who puts the future in your hands?
Did you get all that? There's a lot of information there to take in, isn't there? I think they transfer their consciousness into robots. They bury them underground to protect themselves from cosmic rays. Then humans crash land on the planet many, many years later, and they can interface. By getting in the cockpit, they essentially transfer their mental power to the robots, and that invokes the power to transform and change. I think then trying to tie in the gimmick, or essentially the major play feature, was the fact these were sort of modular building sets that you could add on to or configure in different ways, and that was really sort of buy more sets and configure them in different ways.
Yeah, it's an interesting toy line because Milton Bradley by this point was part of Hasbro.
Yeah,
like you said, the company launched them in 1984. Originally, there were 4 sets. There was Argus, Tyrannix, Bront, and Ventrax, and they had different numbering for them. Argus was the bigger of the 4. He was labeled Series 2000. He retailed at the time for about $60,
right?
Which 40 years ago was a good chunk of change. Tyrannix and Ventrax were the smaller of the 2 sets. Bront was sort of in the middle. And the gimmick was they were construction toys, and the connecting bits were hexagonal, and there were engines with each of the sets that you come out with. There were a couple of accessory packs that you could get as well. Argus came with 5 engines. I think Venturek came with 2. They had different kind of mechanisms to work, and they were stupendous. I actually had an Argus growing up. I thought it was a tremendous set. Each one came with a 3 3/4 inch 5 points of articulation action figure, which was later adapted so that originally it was just an action figure, and then they remolded the body so there was actually the hexagonal port in the back, so you could actually connect the figure to the construction that you were making. All the parts were interchangeable. You had wheels, you had cockpits, you had basic bits. Like you said, you had the engines and whatnot. So it was just a building set, and even the artwork had to change. So originally it was just a picture of a kid on the cover building something, showing some of the artwork, some of the pictures of what you could build with this stuff. And then as they moved into '85, and they decided that they were going to do a cartoon to market it to parents and to kids. They moved into having a more stylistic animation style visual. Now, what's interesting is that you take a character like Tyrannix. In the cartoon, he's a bipedal monster robot. I don't think you could actually build him in that way.
Yeah,
he was
right.
he was basically a starship.
Yeah.
He had like some stickers that sort of look like teeth in sort of a Tiger Force style, but I don't think you could actually build him. And I don't know how popular the line is. You can still find the kits out there, the original ones, either the ones before the cartoon pictography or the ones after, for a decent price. Like you said, the cartoon it was part of Super Sunday. There were 15 episodes of 6 minutes apiece. They all got jammed together into a 90-minute cartoon, which is widely available on YouTube. I have it on DVD from the UK. It's a fantastic walk down memory lane because the voice actors are basically the same as the Transformers. So you've got this transforming toy, because that is basically how they interpreted it. They didn't know how to do the construction toys in any other way than to say, well, we'll have a human interface with them, and then that will have multiple transformations. But so the characters in the show are, and I'm not talking the human characters, but the robotics themselves. You have Argus, who's voiced by Arthur Bernhardt, who did Devastator, who did Destro famously in G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
You've got Bront, who is Frank Welker. You've got Jarrock, who is Neil Ross, who's best known for Springer and Shipwreck, and Keith from Voltron. You've got Nara, who is Susan Slow, who is was involved in Biker Mice. You have Ventrek or Contour. I'll come back to him in a minute. Who's done by Michael Bell, who's Prowl and Duke. Baltar again is done by Arthur. Nemesis is Peter Cullen, as we know as Xandar from G.I. Joe, and of course our Ironhide and Optimus Prime. Tyrannix is Frank Welker. Stegor is I believe Frank Welker, and Goon is Corey Burton, who is Shockwave and a number of other characters. And then they have their human characters. What's interesting about the cartoon is how much is in that cartoon and how little there is in that cartoon. So, humans are shot down by a spaceship, and end up basically befriending the robotics. The humans divide themselves into 2 factions, just like the Protectons and the Terror Corps, to allow for that interface. They have a 6-minute adventure. They have the next 6-minute adventure. But what's funny is that the humans end up on this planet of Skilor because they've been shot down by an Azorian battle cruiser. In the cartoon, there's just these two ships fighting. The Azorians take off after the ship crash lands. We never hear from them again. In the comic, they go into a little bit more detail that it's a misunderstanding, that the Azorians are a race that shoots first, shoots second, and never asks any questions. So at least it explains why we don't see them anymore. But it's never really understood why you have this cast of, a dozen humans on a ship where there's clearly factions there, where you have this conflict between a crew, what they're doing out in space. Are they explorers? Are they mercenaries? Are they profiteers? It's unclear. But yeah, Milton Bradley ran with the line from 1984 to 1994. It was sold off to Learning Curve in 94, and they put out robotics till 2001. So a lot of the same toys. I think Argus went the longest. Various packaging variations. As it changed from company to company, they would change the colors. So you got much more vibrant colors as opposed to grays and blacks. You got reds and blues and greens and whatnot. After Learning Curve let go of the license, it went to Robotics and Things from 2001 to 2019. And then it shipped to a company called Robotic Rice, which is a strange name. And they had it up until just after the pandemic, so in 2021. It looks like from Robotic Rice's website that they were using it. It had moved into the educational play realm, and I think Robotic Rice was doing classes, like trying to use it as a way of encouraging interest in engineering and sciences in the STEM, and then COVID put a halt to that, and they just decided they were going to walk away from it. So, but still, you have a toy line that has basically lasted about 40 years. Everything was cross compatible. So if you had stuff from your dad's collection, and you had bought stuff before the pandemic, it was all compatible. There was one set that I saw that was basically, a 4 or 5 foot tall robot that you could make from the stuff. When they were in that sort of, we're going to license it as a action figure, action adventure style toy in 85, Milton Bradley turned around and started, increasing the connection between the cartoon and the line itself. And so in the 1986 Milton Bradley catalog, which I was able to pick up last summer, you can see a lot of the unreleased toy, cartoon-related toys. So there's a Boltar, there's a Stegor that never came out, which I'm pretty sure you could probably make. There's probably a couple of unique parts in there. Certainly the drivers are unique, but most of the stuff could be formed by other pieces of robotics. So it's a hard line to sort of nail down what was made and what wasn't, because a lot of the stuff that's in the catalogs, I've never been able to see. And then there's a lot of stuff that was put out that never showed up in the catalogs. That happens sometimes. There's not a lot of other merchandise around there. It was not a license that I'm aware of that had like a lunchbox, although it's Milton Bradley, so there were puzzles. Strangely not listed in the Milton Bradley catalogs that I have, but there were 3 puzzles for Argus, Tyrannus, and Bront. Ventrek, Bront, and Argus. Tyrannus, if there is one, and I suspect that there is, I just haven't found it.
Right.
So.
Yep.
But the other thing that I would say is, like, I'm fascinated by this line. I have loved this since I was a kid myself. Many years ago, I booked a URL with intention of making a robotics website. Haven't done it. Still have the URL in my possession, and the URL is, of course, who puts the future in your hands.com.
It's a catchy,
bit of a mouthful.
It's a catchy catchphrase. I think the song robotics.
Always.
But just on that, on your URL, originally robotics with an X, because that's
yes,
that's what makes something really cool is when you spell it not how
You've
it
got
actually.
the X.
Yeah, you got the power. It's extreme. But I think later, is that right? In some of those, in the later subsequent acquisitions, the name did change to robotics with an ICS.
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I think that sort of comes in because of the company being called Robotics
Right.
CES, and so there's some mixture there. I mean, it's weird. If it hadn't been for the cartoon, I don't think people would have remembered it. I mean, there was a construction toy at the time called Construx, and it didn't have a cartoon, and people are aware of it. Completely different modular base, so they're not compatible at all. But you know. Or Lego, which never had a cartoon. You know, it sort of falls into that sort of area. One of the things that's really interesting about the cartoon, though, is that there is this character Ventrak, who starts life as Contour. So he starts as a Protecton.
Yep.
They take the essence of that Protecton out. They stick in the evil Ventrak, and he's basically a double agent on the inside.
Right.
And he keeps foiling the Protectons throughout the series arc. And what's neat about it is that throughout the 15 episodes, they don't reveal that Ventrak is a bad guy until the end. Usually, that conceit is, they out themselves as a villain very quickly, and in this one they kept it throughout the entire thing. But yeah, like you hear some of the voices, and you're like, I mean, it's Starscream arguing with Optimus Prime about who should be the leader of the TerraCorps. So,
yeah, it's leaning into, I guess, some of the tropes or concepts that made Transformers what it is, I guess. And it's fair to say, I guess, the cartoon never really got anything beyond the 15 6-minute episodes. It sort of never got renewed for anything longer than that. I don't even know. I mean, I have no the images. If you're unfamiliar with what they look like, they're that very sort of 80s industrial sci-fi look with, sort of fairly angular and hard edge contours. The cockpits are really nice, sort of triangular shaped, and they sort of open up and you can put your pilot inside. But I don't have any recollection of this in toy stores. I certainly don't remember the cartoon. I wonder if it even made it to Australia. If anyone knows, do shout out if anyone had this in Australia in their collection. But I presume if it was here, it was very short lived, and I've certainly never seen it pop up in the secondary market, any of the sort of flea markets or conventions. So that would be an interesting question. But for you, Colin, being in Canada, that was something that obviously remember it being on the Sunday morning 90-minute hour, or 90 minutes of power. But do you remember this clearly in terms of walking into the store and seeing this on shelves?
I do remember, like I said, I did have Argus as a kid. I vaguely remember seeing it on the shelves. The memory isn't as strong as it is for like Transformers or G.I. Joes on the shelves. But yeah, it was certainly something that was sort of ubiquitous. I think one of the things that doomed it, frankly, was a price point that was so expensive. When you're trying to, you're getting a toy at $60. There's no $5 add-on that you can do. It's not like Transformers, where it's like you can get the Optimus Prime or the Metroplex, but you can also get a Bumblebee or a Wheelie or a Beachcomber, right? Like there was your base price was probably about $30, which was a lot for people. And excuse me, a lot of used parts, a lot of parts to lose. but it really was Headmasters before Headmasters.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very, very cool. Well, thank you for taking us through robotics and another vintage toy line retrospective. We did the Shadow last week, and we had some Shadow fans out there. It's always good to hear your thoughts. So shout out if you remember robotics, or you've got any, or you still collect it. But like Lego, still compatible, still using the same designs, 40, 50 years on. It's quite incredible. Speaking of Lego, actually, Colin, I managed, there was a brand new Lego certified store that opened up here in Adelaide today. This our second certified store. I got invited along for the grand opening. There was a soft opening on Thursday night, and we did the official opening today. We was there with the Premier, who cut the ribbon with a giant pair of Lego scissors. And I turned to Josh.
I saw the picture.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
It was fantastic. I got to chat to the Premier, Peter Malinauskas, who wonderful guy. Funnily enough, Josh and I got asked to do a birthday party to come along and run some Lego activities and sort of give the kids some building challenges like a mini Lego Masters. And one of the kids there, the dad was Peter Malinauskas, who is the Premier. So we'd sort of caught up with him at this other Lego birthday party, and it was quite funny to see him opening a Lego store. But yeah, he had these Lego scissors, and he cut the ribbon, and the ribbon, got cut in half. And I turned to Josh, and I'm like, how did they make those like scissors sharp? And he's like, no, the ribbon is pre-cut, and they just pull it. And it's just like, sort of like a very loose sort of Velcro sort of touch. And so when he pretends to cut, then they just pull this thing and it looks like he's cut it. But it was fantastic. But yeah, it was really, really good store opening. And the queue, I was amazed at how long this queue was, going all around the shopping centre. And I think it took people about 2 hours. If you weren't sort of in and you were towards the back, you're about 2 hours waiting in the queue to get in. But it was really great. Like, there was a little girl there with her dad, front of the line, and we went and had a chat to sort of people in the line, see how they were going. They'd got there at 6:30 in the morning. They were first in line, and so when Lego came out, they gave her a free, really nice set, and there were giveaways and lollies and all sorts. So it was a really fun store opening, but it just goes to show how some of these construction toys are still kicking around, decades later.
Well, I'm fascinated by Lego because, I heard this story recently that Mattel had put in an offer to buy Lego for $150 million at the time or something like that.
Yeah.
And it went to the desk of the CEO, and the chief financial officer said, "Yep, this is a good deal.
Yeah.
But you should know it's going to wreck our first quarter results."
That's
for the
right.
year.
Yep.
And the CEO balked, and
Yep.
there was an out clause where Mattel gives Lego $30 million.
That's right.
And to
walk
cancel
away.
the deal.
Yep. And
to walk
they took
away,
it.
Lego.
They took the
And
out
they took
clause
it.
because they didn't want the dip.
Yep. And then fast forward, Lego, which was in financial difficulty, which is why they were trying to get into the agreement in the first place.
Yep.
Used that $30 million to create Bionicles
Yep.
and some of those lines, and then basically now, do they make $150 million a month? Right, like the sales are phenomenal for Lego. Right,
I reckon they sold
Like,
$150 million in our store opening today. It was a joke, but I mean, it's just money hand over fist for the Lego Corporation. I did actually see. I think that was that Brian Vock Weiss who did that little pop up.
That's the one I saw. Just
Yeah,
recently.
it was fantastic.
So,
I didn't know
tremendous.
that, and I found that amazingly fascinating. And I think in a way, I mean, actually watching Dan Larson's Secret Galaxy video on robotics in preparation for this episode, he talked about, like, in a world where Hasbro will eventually acquire every toy line out there and every toy property, and acquired Milton Bradley and all this. It was quite funny, but also quite poignant. And I think my view on this, and look, I think Hasbro is a great company that does a lot of good things, but sometimes I think we're in a better world that Lego remained a sort of family-owned business out of Denmark, and can make, I guess decisions that are not sort of, corporate or it can make really, really nice decisions. I was actually talking to a lady today at the opening who is she goes around to the stores and makes sure the stores are all done in the, in the right format and the product is placed the right way. And she actually works for Lego, Lego Corporation, Lego out of Denmark, out of Billund, so not some sort of other enterprise. And she couldn't speak more highly of the culture and what a wonderful group that Lego is. And you definitely get that sense. So I think we probably all as fans dodged a bullet with that CEO's terrible financial decision, but probably good for toy diversity.
There's a great podcast called Business Movers, hosted by Lindsey Graham, not the senator, a different Lindsey Graham, and there's a 4-episode story about the legend of Lego from the 1930s right into the present day, which is really useful, really interesting listening. They're a fantastic company. But I think coming back to your point about, Hasbro until all are one, as Dan Larson used to say, until he, of course, ended up as a pitch person for Hasbro too. He sort of softened the language on that, I think, a bit. There was such a diversity of companies in the 80s, and we saw out of that a lot of hits, a lot of misses too. But I mean, there was a lot more willingness to take risks on things. So you had Kenner, and you had Irwin, and you had Tonka, and you still had Mattel and Hasbro, obviously, but you had these other toy companies out there, and that's sort of what gave us, Mask. It gave us Centurions. It gave us a number of toy lines that, nostalgia-wise are interesting for collectors, but you had more diversity on the shelves. And I worry sometimes we talk about how the toy industry has moved more to a collector's base because kids are playing with video games. They're doing online stuff. They're not as interested into traditional toys. I have a long-term fear that we are moving into this situation very much like comic books, where affordability is going to be an issue, where interest is going to be an issue. And while things seem like there's a lot of interest now in a collector's market, that collector's market is going to decline because the youth of now are not going to have that connection, that relationship with toys that we did, that is going to allow them to be long-term collectors. So, and I think part and parcel of that is when you have a couple of big businesses that keep recycling the same stuff, and there's not something out there that is uniquely for a generation, then there's less to grab onto and encourage that collectability and that nostalgia going forward. So
yeah, I think that sums it up. That sums up the I guess the risk sort of, or the fact that the toy landscape that certainly we knew in the 80s and 90s it certainly doesn't exist in the same way, and obviously things change. That's inevitable, but it is. I have that same sort of fear of what is the thing that will really connect with that audience that they'll be nostalgic about, and the way I sort of view it is almost it's property centric. So if properties get big enough or popular enough, they can sort of spawn toys, but also ancillary pop culture merchandise or artifacts, whatever they happen to be. That I think that sort of for the adult community is alive and well, and is certainly, I think, buoying, is sort of keeping everything afloat to some degree. Is almost that adult collector market. It doesn't necessarily have to be toys and action figures. It can be sort of other peripheral things. But that love for, I love X property, and therefore I want to have that on my desk at work, or I want to have that on my desk at home, or have a representation of that on my shelf, is certainly a thing. Whether that be, you like Harry Potter, so you buy the Harry Potter Lego sets, It's probably more around that brand, but yeah, definitely it's a fascinating, and we'll have to come back to that point because I think it would make a very interesting topic for discussion. But Colin, thank you so much for volunteering at the 11th hour to come on for this 399th episode as we draw ever closer to episode 400, and sharing your incredible knowledge on toys, Kickstarters, and of course you had to sneak in the catalogs as well, which is your brand. We know you as the catalog king here on Toy Power. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to fill in, and looking forward to having the whole gang back for episode 400.
Yeah, now it might be that we do a sneaky, episode 399.1 as we prepare for that. We might still be a couple of weeks away, but it will be coming, and we hope to. I think Frank recently changed jobs, and he lost a lot of the tech. Peripheral equipment that he sort of had as part of his old job, so he's going to have to acquire a new computer to work out how do we do the live stream, but I think that's all happening. So hopefully we will be doing something live for 400, and details will come out about dates and times so you can join in. Hopefully plenty of giveaways and all sorts of shenanigans as we celebrate 400.
And I saw on the socials that a couple of you are involved in a television project on toys in Australia.
Yeah, you're spot on. That actually, we have an air date for that show. It's called Cards and Collectibles. It's going to be on Channel 9 and 9 now. It is fantastic. So Frank and I are both featuring, I think, in the same episode. So Frank is doing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I'm doing Masters of the Universe. So, it sounds like got to talk to the director and producer, and it sounds like a passion project that he's been working on. Very, very well shot, well put together. It looks very exciting. So, yeah, we hope to get him on when that goes to air so we can chat through that new show and hopefully let our international fans know how they can get that into your eye holes, because it can be a bit tricky sometimes with these local releases.
Absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful.
A little easier now with the internet than it was in days past.
Yeah,
but, I'm always amazed at what Canadian culture has made it around the world, right? And I'll tune into Geek Dudes, and they'll be talking about the Beachcombers, and I'm like, how do you even know that is a thing?
Yeah, that's right. Wonderful. Well, we will catch you around, Colin. Thanks very much for coming on again. Thank you to all our listeners for tuning into another episode of Toy Power, and to all our patrons, thank you for your ongoing support and chatter on the Discord. Stay safe, take care of one another, and we will see you around the toy aisles.
And until next time, good journey!
You can find the Toy Power team at all the usual online places. Facebook.com/Toy Power Podcast, at Toy Power Podcast on both Twitter and Instagram, or have your say and email us, toypowerpodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe to the show on both iTunes and Stitcher, and please leave us a review. Otherwise, we just assume we're awesome.